They got to get into the quarterbacks, Rich. This is your MO. It's getting more and more difficult to find these edges because they're all getting like pushed up and up and up. I want to first pick your brain on the big three. You have it as Jalen Hurts as QB1, Mahomes is 2, Allen is 3. I'm correct on that one?
Yeah.
So where do you think the edge is for drafting those guys in a single quarterback redraft league right now? How high are you willing to push that tier of quarterbacks up?
Man, here's the thing about it. It's being the first guy to take a quarterback is very tough because you don't know when QB2 is going to come off the board, right? You're at the mercy. Like you could say, I could give you an answer and say Jalen Hurts is like worth a 3-4 turn pick, right? But what if Josh Allen then goes 2 rounds later?
Yeah.
So like it's always really hard. Now, granted, like you probably will see those guys be grouped together. They'll nest together in ADP, but like you still are at the mercy when you take QB1 of not knowing when QB2 is coming off the board. And like, do you forego just like a massive amount of opportunity cost? So it's always very hard. I do think like that subset of quarterbacks, we've seen the Konami code change, right? Like when I wrote that article 10 years ago, it was that people were unwilling to draft perceived bad quarterbacks, right? Like people were like, I'm not going to take him. He sucks. But you don't count for like the rushing, right? Or you're talking about guys like Tim Tebow and, Cam Newton, guys like that. It's like, well, he's not a good quarterback. Why would I want him in fantasy football? And that's like, highlighting the weight that rushing production had. But now we're not getting like that type of quarterback anymore. Like we had Taysom Hill 2 years ago. Justin Fields was kind of throwbacky Konami last year. But now we're getting these guys coming to the team. Jalen Hurts like that last year. It's hard to combat those guys. Like Josh Allen's thrown for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And then he's rushing for 700. It's like, it's hard for fantasy football to combat that with the guys that can now throw and run. And we've seen that subset of quarterback really just dominate ADP for obvious reasons. So the gamers know, man. The gamers know. And there's a finite amount of those guys, even though more are coming into the league. That's the hardest thing on Justin Fields because like plays. So like we don't get that passing jump. Because you have to at his ADP now. At Justin Fields' ADP, you have to have it. He has to flirt with 25 to 30 passing touchdowns. He just has to at that ADP. But when you start breaking these guys into like tiers, like it still makes way more sense to take a swing on a guy like Justin Fields over a Joe Burrow, over a Justin Herbert, over a Trevor Lawrence, because those guys are like the running backs we talked about. Like they're like the Nick Chubbs, the Jonathan Taylors. Like for Joe Burrow to be the QB1 overall, like he has to throw 40 passing touchdowns and maybe has to flirt with 50 to be the actual QB1. And he's the guy that even gives you a little bit of rushing. He gives you a little, but like the way that rushing is weighted and the way that these guys that have elite rushing production now have the capability to throw for 4,000 yards, to throw for 35 touchdowns. It's just really hard to kind of sword and shield that with guys that are largely passing based.
No, I love it. And I think that kind of the way that I'm approaching it with the big three is if I feel like the edge is gone, that's when I would dive into them. So if it becomes like a wide receiver I'm not so excited about or a running back, I think that's the way you handle it. But I want to kind of pick your brain quickly on Lamar Jackson because right now his ADP, you bring up Joe Burrow. When we started doing best balls, people have been doing best balls all year, Rich, but when people really started diving into it, he was like right behind Burrow. The positive vibe drafts. So he's pretty close to making it into a big four. Do you view Lamar Jackson as incredibly close to the elite production of the big three, or do you think that it's maybe getting a little bit too propped up?
No, I definitely think he belongs because we've seen it, right? It happened. It's already happened. And that 2019 season came with, Willie Snead as his wide receiver too, and throwing touchdowns to Seth Roberts. Now we can definitely poke holes in like the guys the Ravens have added, like on an individual basis. Like, what are we going to get out of Odell Beckham at his age, post missing a year at ACL? Like, is Rashad Bateman going to stay healthy? Is Zay Flowers? Like, we could kind of poke holes in those guys, and I think add Nelson Aguilar to that. But when you collectively put them together versus what the Ravens put on the field the past 2 years at wide receiver, especially last year, it's just night and day, man. It's just front to back a better collective sum of parts. And then you add in Likely and Mark Andrews still being there. Then you add in Todd Monken being there. And not only are the Ravens going to throw more under Todd Monken, like they're going to play with pace. Like look at all of Monken's teams. Like they play with tempo. And you've already seen that with the Ravens. Like, talk about this in camp. Like, playing with tempo is going to be a larger thing this season. So it kind of, you put all these things together with Lamar, and he maybe he's not as comfortable as a pick of those top three because he has maybe a lower floor outcome like he's had the last 2 years, but he still has that requisite ceiling. And like, if you're playing live after those guys, it just is.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I think that I'm really buying into it, and I hope I'm not overdrafting these Ravens. But you bring up the Mark Andrews earlier in the show about what a red hot start he got to last year. Lamar Jackson from the beginning of last year was actually outscoring how he started out 2019. So like, we saw it, and I really do believe in Monken and the additions that they've added to that offense. It's really gonna, make Baltimore extremely productive, and it's Lamar Jackson season, man.
The final 14 weeks,
it was tough. It was tough. But now, like, even if we don't believe in Odell this year producing fantasy wise, I think the fact that Baltimore went out and got him, like, was showing that they're serious about this. And then they used the draft capital on Zay Flowers right after giving Lamar the big contract. I mean, it was very exciting. And I also think that, like, kind of the way they ignored the running back position means they think Dobbins is going to be fine this year and in for a big season. So I'm all in, man. I think Baltimore's great.